a giant spider horror for audio narration. My name is Ben Walker, and I am the youngest of 3 brothers. I was 20 that fall, still cocky enough to trust trail markers and family jokes more than weather. I'm telling this because there is a cave under Archer's Ridge that keeps a hunger tucked inside it. And if you go there, you'll feel your heartbeat start to count. Not for you, but for something with too many legs. There were 5 of us. Dad, Michael, Mom, Sarah, my brothers Evan and Luke, and me. We camped every October. We had rules. No cliff edges in the dark, no bragging rights for risk, and no food in the tents. None of those rules helped underground. We left the highway under a sky the color of clean aluminum and drove into the pines until the world got quiet around the edges. Dad told the same story he always told about burning beans his first year of marriage. Mom rolled her eyes and smiled. Evan argued directions with the GPS just for sport. Luke pretended indifference and secretly checked the forecast every 10 minutes. I watched the tree line and tried not to be the youngest. We reached the Archer's Ridge trailhead at noon, bright and ordinary. The map promised a loop, a lookout, and a creek. We hiked, we laughed, we collected leaves because Mom still liked pressing them into books. When the clouds thickened and the air learned rain, we hurried the way people hurry when they think they own the weather. The storm didn't roar. It pinpricked, a steady glass bead fall that turned the path into a memory. We scanned for a bluff to shelter under and found instead a mouth in the hillside, horizontal, wide, with a lip of rock like a tired jaw. Cold air issued from it, the kind that smells like coin and old rope. 15 minutes, Dad said. Let the worst pass. Feels wrong, Luke muttered, but he followed us in. We clicked on headlamps. The ceiling arched low, veined with mineral like old marble. The floor splayed into 2 tunnels, one shallow and one that tilted down in a way that suggested choices you'd regret. Stay in the foyer, Mom said. No exploring, we agreed. Then a gust from the deeper tunnel carried the sound of dripping water and the promise of a drier chamber. And the rain at the mouth thickened, and we made a small decision that turned into a big one. We went down. The passage should have narrowed. Caves like to pinch you back toward daylight. This one opened. Our lights found a room the size of a gymnasium, with pillars where mineral had poured itself from ceiling to floor. A rope trailed down one side, anchored to a spike hammered into stone. The rope wasn't new. It wasn't old either. Mom touched it, frowned, and wiped her hand on her jacket. Sticky, she said, like a question. We saw gear on a boulder, an orange hard hat, a climbing harness, an empty canteen, a torn field notebook. Evan flipped the notebook open to a page stamped with a military crest and a line that said, "Forward search, Archer Ops." Below, a handwritten note. Sector 3 viable. Large cavity, prior signs. Maintain radio check. If contact lost, hold at observation. Military? Dad asked. Out here? We started calling hello, the way ordinary people do when they expect ordinary answers. Nothing answered us except echo. Beyond the pillars, a slot canyon of stone led deeper. We squeezed through and came out on a ledge that surveyed a second chamber, larger than the first. The floor below that ledge was littered, I will be careful with words here, with evidence that people had been in the cave before us, and some of them had not figured out how to leave. Boots still on legs that were not. A gloved hand that looked like it had relaxed into a pose it hadn't chosen. Insects worked with the patience of clerks. Back, Mom said, voice barely above breath. We go back. That's when Evan clicked his lamp up and aimed it at the ceiling. Above us, tucked into the vault like a folded cathedral of silk, a shape slept. At first it looked like a sagging sail, yellowed and thick. Then our lamps traced the edges, and the edges were joints, and the joints were legs, and the center of that sail was a body big enough to make the cave look proportional. The abdomen rose and fell slowly, a tide inside skin. Along the wall behind it, a sack plumped and deflated with the same patient rhythm, as if the air itself had become web. The thing lifted one leg, set it down, tap, 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 and settled again into sleep. Mom folded us close with her eyes. Back! Now! We eased toward the slot where we'd come through. The ceiling spider did not stir. The chamber, however, changed its mind about silence. From the far side, deeper in, came a scratchy hiss like something working at stone with rope. Then, faint and unhelpful, a radio crackle. Repeat, forward team. Check. Followed by the click of a transmitter that had once expected an answer. Luke pointed to a body in partial uniform collapsed beside a pack, a shoulder patch with an eagle. On the chest, a radio pressed against a strap. Dad gave me a look I'd seen on him at broken-down cars and kitchen leaks. Now or never. He slid down the slope, kept low, and reached the pack. The radio was cold, but when he thumbed it, the speaker plucked up courage and sputtered static into voice. Forward search, Archer Ops. Identify. Dad didn't hesitate. Hikers 5 trapped underground with an animal. He swallowed the word he wanted. We need directions. Silence. Then, stay off main floor. Do not disturb webbing. If possible, move to high ground and hold. Maintain radio. We are tracking your signal. Say again location cues. Dad described the pillars and the ledge, the slot, the gear. The voice repeated back our feature names like a checklist. Hold tight. Do not engage. If the specimen is at rest, you are safer still than moving. How many adults? 2, Mom said into the mic. 3 sons. The voice turned calmer in a way that felt like training. Copy, we have ordnance in the air. We will need you clear of Sector 3 when we make our push. Ordnance? Luke asked. Missile strike, Evan said quietly, eyes on the ceiling. They're going to smash the hive, the radio. We prefer targeted detonation to collapse. Remain ready. If movement occurs, deploy flame and retreat upslope to primary mouth. Repeat, fire is effective. Fire, Dad murmured. At last a rule. In the fallen soldier's pack we found a sidearm. 3 magazines, a chemlight bundle, a fusee flare, and a small canister with a nozzle labeled thermal foam. Ignite. We took what we dared. We began to climb. The climb back to the slot felt twice as long. Our headlamps cast nervous halos. Somewhere below, a small rock ticked against another, and the sound traveled like a rumor. The ceiling shape did not move until it did. The first sign was the air changing, colder by a degree, then a skin temperature warmth like a breath that had learned to watch. The second sign was the tap, tap, tap of many legs finding the rhythm of stone. The third was a sound like canvas being pulled, only stickier like a long strip of tape lifted off a window in winter. Hold, Dad whispered. If it doesn't see us, it might. A strand fell from the ceiling, fat as a rope, glistening. It landed on the ledge 2 feet from my hand and stuck with an attitude. Another strand descended near Luke's boot, and he jerked his foot away. Almost lost balance, then pressed himself flat against the wall, chest scraping mineral like prayer. The ceiling unfolded. The legs. 8, because of course came awake like doors opening one after another. Joints flexed and clicked softly. The body slid along its own anchors, silent except for the occasional tap that seemed to test where gravity had gone. The head, if that's the word, lowered. We saw not eyes too many, too black, or mouth too hinged, too patient, but intent. It smelled like wet stone, mouse, and a chemical that made my tongue taste copper. "Ben," Mom said without turning, "don't blink fast. It notices quick things." We resumed the oldest talent people have, stillness. The strand near my hand twitched and crept toward my sleeve, as if it were making a decision about my jacket. I edged away. The spider lowered another line and tested the air with the end of it, tapping the rock with a tiny echo. Tap, tap, tap. Not random. Counting, the radio on Dad's chest whispered, "Forward team status." Dad pressed the transmit gently, as if volume was a substance you could spill. "Awake on ledge holding, copy." A pause. "We have aircraft on station. We will try to draw it off the primary chamber. Mark your position if safe." Evan broke a chem light and shielded it with his hat, then flashed it twice low near the ledge and snuffed it. Far below, a secondary hiss moved, a companion or a shiver in the silk. The spider above us extended 2 forelegs and felt the air again, then pulled itself with a fluid glide toward the far wall away from our ledge, following some tremor we hadn't caused. "Now," Dad said. Through. We funneled into the slot. Mom first, then Luke, then me, then Evan, then Dad. The passage pinched my pack and I left part of a strap behind like tribute. In the first chamber, the pillars and the rope. We paused only long enough to breathe air that hadn't been borrowed from stone. Behind us, the spider changed its mind. The tap-tap-tap accelerated into a dry skitter that told my bones to start running without asking permission. "Up," Dad said. "Primary mouth, move." We hustled over uneven floor, around the pillars, past the orange hat that was never going to be worn again. The rope at the lip of the climb looked human and comforting until I noticed how it shined. Not rope, silk. Whoever anchored it had tied into the wrong thing. We scrambled anyway. Dad boosted Mom. Evan hauled Luke. I tried the sidearm and nearly dropped it, hands slick, then shoved it back into the holster because dumb is heavier than bullets. A shadow passed across the chamber like someone carrying a blanket overhead. Immense, temporary, not aligned with any light we owned. At the entrance the rain had gone humble. The forest exhaled wet green. We crashed into it like animals and became small again. "Radio," Mom said. Dad keyed it. "We're topside, mouth of the cave." "Hold there," the voice said. "Do not run blind. We need exact positions. Mark the mouth with light. Pull back 60 meters if you can. We're going to make it choose." We broke 2 chem lights and set them to either side of the opening. The forest accepted them like odd flowers. Then we retreated, into the trees, crouching behind a fallen log that had learned moss and maturity. The cave mouth darkened. Something took the shape away from the doorway and tried on the shape of the woods instead. The spider did not rush out. It tested the threshold with 2 legs, then 2 more, tapping the dirt. Tap, 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 until the measure satisfied it. Then it unfolded further and stepped into the rain. I had never imagined that size could move so softly. The radio said, "Hold. Aircraft inbound from west. Pop a hand flare if it closes with you." A beat. "If family members are separated, keep voice contact to a minimum." Sound draws. It would have been nice to know that earlier. The spider came left, then right, head if it was ahead, tilting in little listening motions. The trunk it passed over creaked a protest and fell quiet, as if it had changed its mind about having rings. The underbrush bowed. The silk lines it extruded as it moved snagged on branches and boulders, and then thickened, like fresh glue rolled between fingers, deciding to be rope. Little bits of leaf debris raced up those lines, as if gravity in its world had other loyalties. "Ben," Dad whispered, "if it turns toward us, we sprint to the creek bed. Evan, take Luke, Sarah with me." I nodded and watched the shape read the forest like Braille. It came near, and I counted my heart in numbers that didn't help. Mom slipped her hand into mine, squeezed once and released. Our family's good luck ping. The radio gave a new voice. Pilot, crisp and calm. "We have your markers. Begin moving downhill now. Keep the mouth behind you. When it pursues, we will make one pass with heat before we go to ordnance." "Heat?" Evan asked. "Flares," Dad said. "Maybe worse." "Move," the pilot said. We moved. The spider noticed. Not us, not exactly. It noticed change. It angled our way, quickening. Branches skimmed over its abdomen and snapped like toys. Its silk threaded the air between trees until the path narrowed, then narrowed again, the lines telling the forest to choose smaller. "Down," Dad snapped. "Under!" We rolled under the webbing. It brushed Mom's back and left a shining streak across her jacket like a brand, then lifted toward the canopy, as if it preferred to own more sky. The spider shifted strategy and closed faster, the tap-tap-tap in our backs turning into a dry thunder. The pilot's voice, marking. A white bar of fire slashed across the spider's flank from above, the aircraft's flares bright as daylight. The creature stalled, legs jerking away from heat as if yanked by invisible ropes, then rallied with insulted vigor. The pilot looped and drew another line of hot brilliance close enough that we felt our hair crisp. The spider hesitated again, but didn't stop. "Ordnance on next pass," the pilot said. No emotion. We hit the creek bed, stones clattering under our boots. Dad waved us through the channel and then turned back, not to play hero, just to place himself between us and the thing. He lifted the foam canister, thumbed the nozzle, and a white stream jetted toward the spider's leading legs. Where the foam touched, it bubbled, then ignited. A crawling orange lace that forced the legs up and out. The spider recoiled, then swung around the burning lines and came on anyway. "Dad!" I shouted. "Go!" he yelled back, voice not angry but certain. We went. Evan had Luke's collar and wasn't letting go. Mom had my wrist and might have taken the hand if I'd argued. We scrambled around a fallen cedar, and a curtain of silk fell on it like a fresh sheet being made. The sheet tightened. The cedar lifted an inch off its bed, then settled as if the world had changed its mind about mass. Behind us, Dad set the flare and threw it. The spider stepped over the new fire, quick and cold, and in stepping, turned its bulk between him and us. Mum stopped. She no longer believed in the math that gets people out by fives. She whispered our names once each like a string she had to cut to make it work. Then she moved the wrong way, toward Dad, not away. "Mom, no!" Luke cried, and Evan hugged him forward with a strength that looked cruel. Mom broke a second ampule from the soldier's kit, a thermal strip, and slapped it against the spider's near leg when it reached to feel the creak. The strip flared. The spider recoiled hard enough to bend a sapling, and then whipped the leg back with a motion that had no care for the space between. Dad shoved Mom aside. They fell together, rolled, and came up separated by webbing that hadn't been there. The pilot's voice said something I didn't hear because the forest filled with a rising howl, not from the spider, from air being pushed aside by speed. The aircraft tore overhead, low, then climbed, then turned like a hawk with homework. "Down," Evan barked. We flattened into the creek bed. The spider reared, half its legs on one bank, half on the other, making the sky small. The missile arrived. It didn't explode like movies. The sound felt like a handshake between distance and decision, followed by a pressure that took the world and folded it, then unfolded it differently. The impact struck near the cave mouth, a blinding blossom. That became heat, then shattered timber, then rain of dirt and sparks. The concussion knocked the spider sideways, legs skittering for balance, web lines going slack and taut in mad sequence. "Move! Now!" the pilot yelled. Evan and Luke sprinted. Mum and Dad tried. The web line between them held. Dad cut at it with his knife, and the knife just wanted to be a butter tool. He looked up at us and smiled that soft smile he used for birthday candles. "Go," he mouthed. "B5 by memory." The spider recovered its grammar and chose my father. He did two smart things at once. Fired the sidearm at its eyes, not to kill, to interrupt, and dumped the remaining foam between it and us. The spider flinched from the bright bites and the heat, and in flinching changed its angle, and in changing its angle left a space. Mom shoved me into that space with a force that answered every meal, every ride to school, every scold, every bedtime story. I stumbled through the gap. Evan dragged Luke past me. We ran. Behind us, voices became noise. The forest tilted. The air went thin. The pilot drew a second white line across the world, and I felt, rather than heard, the second strike hit, farther up, closer to the cave. The shock picked me up and put me down somewhere my legs hadn't applied for. Stones clacked. The sky went small, then kind, then dark. I fainted. When I woke, rain tapped my face like a careful friend. Sirens stayed far away where they belonged. The creek whispered the same sentence it always says. Evan knelt above me, mud-streaked, eyes bright with salt. Luke sat with his back against a stump, cradling his hand as if holding a bird. The cave mouth was a new hill of torn earth and steam. The air had that burned sugar scent of hot silk. "Mom and Dad?" I asked, though I already knew the grammar of the answer. Evan swallowed. The word he tried to use got lost on the way out. They made the path. We lay there a long time, counting breaths because counting anything else had too many corners. Then the forest filled with boots and calm voices and blankets that never feel warm enough. A woman with stripes on her sleeve took the radio off Dad's strap where it lay under a drift of ash and said very softly, "We got you." They debriefed. First for hours in a white tent that made the world feel like paper. They used phrases like secondary objective met and containment and minimal collateral, phrases that pile themselves between you and pictures you don't want. I told them about the tap, 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 and the breathing sack, and the foam that loved fire. Evan told them about the rope that wasn't. Luke told them about Mom's good luck ping. The stripes on the sleeve squeezed his shoulder and didn't let go for a minute. They asked if we saw eggs. We said no because we didn't, and because sometimes no is the kindest word. They flew us out at dusk. Archer's Ridge dropped away like a secret refolded. Over the headphones the pilot said, "I'm sorry about your folks." I said, "Me too," and didn't recognize my voice. I live differently now. I don't hang sweaters on hangers that squeak. I don't sleep with the window open. If I see silk in the woods, I step around it with the kind of respect you give to names. Evan checks the ceiling of every parking garage like it owes him money. Luke takes the long way to class if a construction forklift lifts anything that looks too much like a leg. People ask me if it was a monster or just an animal. I don't know the difference anymore. I know it tapped to the rhythm of our breath and counted us as if inventory helps you sleep. I know fire wrote the only word it feared. I know a cave that is probably a hill now, and under that hill there are probably more rooms, and in those rooms may be more ropes that are not ropes. If you want a rule to take with you, when you see a mouth in the hillside, listen to the air that comes out of it. If it smells like coin and old rain, that's just weather. If it smells like a fresh rubber band and your tongue tastes copper, don't go in. If you are already in, find height and heat. Keep your family together until the moment you can't. And when you can't, love is the only thing worth throwing into the gap. The night that saved me arrived on a wing with a stripe and a number. The thing that almost took me still runs in my dreams, soft as wind, vast as ceilings, patient as clocks. Sometimes I wake to a noise in the apartment, just pipes learning to settle, and my heart starts counting again. Tap, tap, tap. I make tea and watch the window darken and remind myself of the only truth I know for sure. The dark is not empty. It's just waiting to be woven.